In 1546, an Askew's shoulder blade tears away from her socket with a wet, grinding sound that echoes through the Tower of London's stone chamber. But that is not even the worst part. What the executioners did next was so specifically designed to destroy women's bodies that modern forensic experts refuse to recreate it for study. You are about to discover the most gender-targeted torture device in human history. A machine that was literally redesigned to exploit female anatomy in ways that will make your skin crawl. I am going to expose 3 horrifying truths that historians have deliberately buried. First, how Tudor engineers modified the rack specifically to target women's childbearing organs and skeletal differences. Second, why one victim's screams were so piercing they could be heard across London Bridge, causing crowds to gather in terror. And third, the shocking reason why some executioners considered this machine too merciful and demanded something even worse. Here is what nobody tells you. This was not just about extracting confessions. The rack was weaponized as the ultimate tool of patriarchal control, designed to break women in ways that would serve as a warning to every other woman who dared challenge male authority. Before we explore history's most gender-specific torture, make sure you are subscribed because what you are about to learn will fundamentally change how you understand systematic oppression. And trust me, you need to stay until the very end because the woman who finally broke this machine will restore your faith in human resilience. Let me take you back to Tudor England, where being born female made you a target. The year is 1534 and Henry VIII has just declared himself supreme head of the Church of England. What follows is not just religious persecution. It is a systematic campaign of terror specifically designed to crush women who dare to think, speak, or believe independently. But here is what your history textbooks conveniently omitted. The Tudor persecution was not gender-neutral. Women faced torture methods that were specifically engineered to target their bodies, their minds, and their social roles in ways that male victims never experienced. Think about the psychology of this moment. You are living in a world where your husband can legally beat you, your father can sell you into marriage, and now the crown can torture you using methods designed around the very anatomy that makes you female. The message was unmistakable. Your body belongs to men, and they will destroy it the moment you forget your place. The Tower of London's torture chambers became laboratories for engineering gender-specific brutality. Records sealed for centuries and only recently examined reveal a calculated system of misogyny. Imagine being a Tudor woman. You read a banned Protestant text, spoke against a policy, or were accused by a jealous neighbor. Within hours you were dragged toward the fortress where men had refined methods to break the female body. The psychology behind this matters even now, because the same mechanisms appear in modern conflicts. Understanding how society's justified targeted cruelty shows patterns of systematic oppression. In 1540, engineer Thomas Norton presented Henry VIII with blueprints that were more than torture designs. They were anatomical studies showing how women's bodies could be exploited. Traditional racks stretched victims evenly. Norton introduced asymmetric tension, targeting women's wider pelvis and lower center of gravity. Adjustable anchor points forced the pelvis to take maximum strain, dislocating the hips in ways that devastated reproductive organs. His notes clinically described vulnerabilities unique to women. Norton worked with court physicians who provided anatomical drawings marking the most sensitive regions. These were educated men turning medical knowledge into tools of suffering. His most disturbing addition was the birthing position restraint. Women were bound as if in childbirth, then stretched, sending a deliberate message. Even their biological role could be turned into agony. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, who studied these designs in 2019, concluded that this systematic approach foreshadowed atrocities centuries later. Askew endured 3 hours and 17 minutes on Norton's rack. Records say her screams shifted into tones male victims never produced. But the psychological assault grew worse. Richard Topcliffe, Elizabeth I's chief torturer, created a 2-device system designed to break minds. The Scavenger's daughter compressed victims into a fetal curl, timed around the menstrual cycle when pain sensitivity peaked. Then they were immediately stretched on the rack, causing what Topcliffe called corporeal confusion, trauma so intense it produced inhuman screams. Some victims even thanked their torturers during brief pauses, mistaking the relief for mercy. Margaret Ward, tortured in 1588 for helping Catholic priests escape, endured 17 cycles of compression and stretching across 2 days. Topcliffe's notes show how she eventually called him father and begged him to guide her, evidence of psychological conditioning meant to destroy women's identity rather than just their bodies. The compression stretching system had a 73% confession rate among women, far higher than traditional methods. Yet one woman's resistance would expose its weakness. John Fox, observing executions in Smithfield Market, documented how female Protestant prisoners transformed torture into a public weapon. In his Book of Martyrs, he recorded how women used their suffering to expose Tudor brutality. Rose Allen, stretched on the rack in 1557, began preaching instead of screaming. Her voice carried through the stone chambers to crowds outside, turning torture into testimony. Joyce Lewis took this further by narrating each action being done to her, forcing executioners into unwanted visibility. What was meant to be secret cruelty became public evidence. Aneskew's final act of resistance was even more strategic. Before her execution, she dictated a precise account listing names, dates, and methods. It spread across Europe, and after 1557, torture became less effective as women learned to weaponize their suffering. Authorities shifted to private executions to avoid public backlash. Then came 1558. Margaret Clitherow, a 43-year-old Catholic convert accused of hiding priests, was dragged into the tower. Over 15 hours she would end the rack's dominance in a way no one predicted. According to official records, Margaret analyzed her torture as it happened. Executioner William Hartwell wrote that she studied their methods instead of breaking. By hour 3 she critiqued their rope tension. By hour 7 she dissected their psychological tactics. Her resistance forced executioners to increase tension far beyond normal limits until the machine itself began to fail. At 15 hours and 37 minutes, the tower's main rack suffered catastrophic structural collapse, the central beam splitting with a crack heard across the Thames. Margaret Clitherow died not from her injuries but from exhaustion after outlasting the machine designed to break her. Her last words recorded by a witnessing priest were, "I have learned much about the weakness of those who mistake cruelty for strength." Within 6 months, Henry VII ordered the rack's removal from regular use. The official reason was mechanical unreliability, but the truth was simpler. Margaret Clitherow had exposed the ultimate weakness of systematic torture. It only works when victims believe their torturers are stronger than they are. The rack that had terrorized Tudor England for decades was finally defeated not by political pressure or moral arguments, but by one woman's refusal to break before the machine that was supposed to be unbreakable. Margaret Clithero's victory over the rack reveals something profound about human resilience that authoritarian systems desperately want us to forget. Systematic cruelty is ultimately self-defeating when it encounters people who refuse to be intimidated by it. The targeting of women's bodies through torture was not unique to Tudor England. From comfort women in World War III to systematic rape in modern conflicts, the same psychological mechanisms that justified the rack are still operating today. Understanding how these systems work is the first step in recognizing and stopping them. But here is what gives me hope about Margaret's story. She proved that even the most sophisticated systems of oppression have a fatal flaw. They depend on their victims' despair more than their physical vulnerability. The rack was designed to break women by exploiting their anatomy, their psychology, and their social roles. But it met its match in someone who understood that true strength is not about avoiding pain. It is about refusing to let that pain define your worth. Which other forgotten torture devices were designed to target specific groups, and more importantly, what modern systems of oppression might be vulnerable to the same kind of resistance that Margaret Clitherow demonstrated? Let me know your thoughts in the comments and make sure you are subscribed because next week I am revealing the medieval punishment that made the rack look merciful. The device that turned execution into a public spectacle of unimaginable cruelty.